Okay, so I'm here gonna walk you through a quick start of the F-16 Charlie and DCS. So what we're gonna need to do to start this is we're going to pull out a checklist. So this is the checklist that I use. It works pretty well. You can also find some other ones that have less detail. So what we're gonna start with is we're going to primarily just do this is a quick start, so I'm not going to be doing everything. The solid white on the left side indicates a quick start for emergency scramble. I will be doing primarily those, but skipping some of the mundane tests and stuff that had to be performed. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the main engine power, or the main power, electrical power. So we're going to flip that up. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take the jet fuel, or the jet start, to start 2. That's going to start our engine up, and we're going to be looking for 20% here. So while this is happening, I'm going to close my canopy. And that's your left control C. And we're going to lock it. And we should have about 20%. So at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to take our throttle and put it up to idle. So, throttle up to idle. So at this point, you should be getting RPMs, you should be getting temperature for your aircraft. Eventually, we'll get some nozzle positioning changes, and we still have the RPMs coming up. It should settle. As you can tell by the checklist over here, we have our settling areas, and we'll be looking for all that. And we'll also have our oil up here. So since this is morning time here on this map, the lights kind of come on automatically. So we have our master caution on. The master caution on is primarily because of our seat is not armed. And so I'm going to hit that there, but we need to make sure we do that, which is later parts of the checklist. So now what we're going to do is we are going to turn on our avionics. And then this is turning that on, turns on our data link, and then we want to turn on our GPS, then we're going to do stored heading. So our DED comes alive, we got our MFDs. One thing that we need to do is we need to adjust the brightness on this, so that we have that on our HSI down here. We want to uncage, so I did this part here. We're doing our checklist setup here, and I'm going to uncage this. And right now we are just going to fly with no weapons, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just turn on our fire control radar and our radar altimeter. So we're going to wait for this to tick down all the way till this right number here is 10, and we'll get it ready in the HUD. So how we turn on the HUD is we'll turn this up here. We don't want to turn it up too bright. I turned it up a little bit too bright because of the lighting. So you want to back it down to get it to the right amount. So got that all set up. We're past this step here, so we can go to the next part of the checklist. The next part of the checklist, we're not really going to do fuel quantities. There's been no known issues with that. So, and flight controls, we're not going to run a bit test because we're doing a real quick start here. So on the next page, we'll finish setting up our avionics. We'll set up our bingo. And we do want to set up our countermeasures, so I'll show you setting up our countermeasures. We're going to go power on here. We're going to go RWR on, jammer on. We're going to go chaff and flare on. We're going to put this up to manual. Standby you won't be able to use. Manual allows you to use the program. Then what we're going to do is we're going to turn on our HMX, our helmet mounted community system symbology. So we got symbology there, and I limited the amount I turned up that knob because of the lighting again. So now you see that in our HUD we have aligned and we have a ready symbol here. That means our stored heading is good to go. Normal, it usually takes about 3 to 4 minutes to do a normal. Stored heading takes about a minute, so I just do the stored heading. So now to set up our other information, we can set up our nav data. So we can put in some specific points, so I'll walk through on how to put in a point. So for right now, we're currently at Sochi, so what we can do is we can actually set this up as if we needed to do an ILS approach into Sochi. So we need 2 waypoints, and I will flip to that knee board now. So that specific knee board, we need the Vader DME and then also the runway itself to do for this ILS approach just in case. So this is if we ever get into instrument flying conditions so that we can still land here at the runway. So how we're going to set that up is we're going to go steer point. So first things first is, forgot to mention this, we want to hit return on this so we're on our main DED page. This is the DED here. Then that activates these top parts of these buttons. So we want to hit steer point. So steer point 1, we're going to put that as the Vader DME. Which is, found it. Sorry, I had to find it in my stuff. So we're going to hit north. See how the N comes up there? North, 4, 3, 2, 0, 5, 0, enter. Make sure you hit the enter. We're going to dauber down. And we're going to go east, 0, 3939, 120. And at that, we want to be at 4,000 feet. So that's our reminder. We don't want to pass below 4,000 feet because that's what that approach chart tells us. So then we're going to hit this up, and that goes us to our steer point 2. So we can hit north. Then we want the Sochi landing. So we're going to go with 4, 3, 2, 6, 3, 6, 0. Enter. Dauber down. East 0, 3, 9, 5, 5, 5, 0, 0. Enter. And this is specifically 98 feet. Enter. So if you're wondering where I got those data information from, so we can come out here, we can look at this right here. We can then hover over here, and if you look in the top left, we have our lat longs that we can program in. Sorry, that was my son speaking. He's assisting me with this video. Okay, so we got that set up. So that's kind of our nav data. If we go to the next page. So here we have our nav data information. So we can set up our bingo and our low altitude. And I believe the sun's setting, so we are actually having to turn this down more. Okay, so how we set up our bingo, so what we're going to do is list, and we see the number 2 here is bingo. So number 2. And so this allows us to set up our bingo. We're going to stay close to the airfield here, so we're just going to be 1,500 pounds is our bingo. Okay. Now that we have that set, we can then set up our low altitude. So we're going to hit the return. We're going to hit the number 2, low altitude. So what we can do is we can actually set this up for that ILS approach if we wanted to. So since we don't want to pass below 4,000 feet on that Vader, we can set this to, we could say we want it close to 4,000 feet because we want to be as close to that as possible. So we're going to set this to like 4,250. So 4,250. So then that tells us, so we can keep track of our altimeter. And then for this is good to know because our mins, we want to be able to see the runway at 250 feet when we come into land. So we can go ahead and set this up for this landing. And since we're not doing any combat, you would probably want for combat to keep those up higher like they were. But for us, since we're just going to do some practice flying around, we're going to set this up for our landing circumstances. So we're going to put 300 feet. So we get an indication and telling us when we need to be looking for the runway. So those are my kind of techniques and I hope they're useful to you. So now what we're going to do is, I don't like the lights as bright, so I'm going to turn down the lights. So as you can tell over here on the lighting panel, we got our primary instruments and consoles. We can turn those down, we can increase the DED, we can turn them down. Then we have our floodlights, which kind of is that back green light that we have. Okay, last but not least, we need to turn on our formation lights, and we need to turn on our mode 4, so everybody knows we're talking. Okay, we got good lights flashing. Okay. So our altimeter for this map, I know it's 2992, so we're good and set there. And just finishing up the checklist here. So now we're at the taxi. So what we're going to do is enable the steering. I recommend binding your nose wheel steering, that in WS, but if you don't have it bound, it is S. So the indication that we have nose wheel steering on is this right here, on the top right side of our cockpit. So we're going to increase the throttle slightly, and we're going to taxi out. Okay, so we can do a brake test. Should have done it first, but we're good. Okay, so one thing you need to remember when taxiing in the F-16 is it rolls really easy. So do not exceed 30 knots when taxiing, and do not exceed 10 knots when turning taxiing. And the checklist I use reminds me of that, because it's a pain. You start to roll pretty easy in this thing. Okay, so now that we're here at the runway, we can then finish our setup. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to turn on Pro-P. Pro-P's way back here in the back. We're going to flip this up. This is going to be key when you have icing conditions. Okay, and we don't want to do it greater than 2 minutes before takeoff. Or you want to do it greater than 2 minutes before takeoff. I kind of did it less than that. We're going to make sure that our pitch and trim are set to in the middle, and we can always set our yaw, or our roll trim, sorry, to asymmetric versus symmetric. Symmetric, you're going to want it dead center, and if you're asymmetric, whatever your heavy side, you're going to turn it to the other way. So if our left side's heavy, you're going to have it go to the right. Okay, we're gonna double check our engine switches are good, and yep, that's good there. Our engine control switch, and canopy's locked. IFF is set. Fuel quantity knob is to normal, and we're gonna set our store into. Currently, we do have fuel tanks, so even though we don't have any other munitions, we're gonna set Cat 2, and our flare and. Yeah, that's not required. Ejection seat safety lever is now lowered, so now we no longer have that warning over here. And yep, we have none in the caution. So one last thing that we want to do is the F-16 is weird. Unlike the other aircraft, we have this oxygen supply, PBG. What that allows is it's a pressure gang load based on the amount of G's you're pulling. So normally, if you're at 1 G, we're only going to get normal oxygen supply. If you start pulling more and more G's, it will increase the percentage from normal oxygen supply all the way up to 100% oxygen. So we want to go ahead and do that, especially if you're pulling G's. So next part of the checklist, we'll look at what we're going to do here on weight-wise. We're pretty light right now. We're probably around, I would say, anything between 25,000 pounds and 30,000 pounds. So we'll probably rotate around 60. Our takeoff will be around 60. We'll rotate around 50. And we have our information versus afterburner versus burner. So we can go ahead and take the runway. We'll do our pre-takeoff checklist. So if you would want to taxi with taxi lights and everything, that's going to be right down here. They're pretty dang bright, and it's not that dark out right now, so we're not going to worry about it right now. We'll go ahead and just leave them on. So as you can tell, that steer point that we made, that second one, it's right here. We can see it right there in the hood because it's right here on this runway. So what we need to do is we need to check our flight controls. So we'll cycle through. Okay, we got good controls, good controls. Okay. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to put our brakes fully in. We're going to throttle up to about 80. Good engines. Okay, so now what we're going to do is now we're going to push it up and release the brakes. We're going to turn off nose wheel steering because that's going to become a pain in our butt if we leave it in too long. And I'm already way too fast, so we can start rotating. We're going to go gear up here. You want to gear up prior to 300 knots. I'm really light, so I really took off quick and accelerated quick. Okay, we're going to continue going, and we're going to nose up about 45 degrees. We're going to make this a high performance takeoff. And there you go. F-16 is pretty easy. We have no flaps, so it goes really easily. And there we go. And that's a quick start takeoff for the F-16. I know I took my time explaining everything. Comment if you have any questions on my quick start. Thank you.